Hello, everybody. It's Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is the 1st of October. It's a Friday of 2021. Today's episode is the perverse academic incentives. Before I get started, just a note to click on the subscription icon down here in the lower right, and also the notification bell in the upper right to be notified when there are future episodes. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Bruce Abramson's new book titled The New Civil War explains how academic incentives cause college historians to become increasingly hostile towards Southern heritage and black-centric in their perspective of the history of the region's people. Since the faculty decide who gets hired, fired, and promoted, young academics realize that only peer approval matters, and the key to impressing peers is to laud their work. A commitment to the presently dominant interpretations and an absolute terror of challenging them is baked into the academic incentive system. Success flows most easily to those young academics who push the conventional wisdom one half step further in the direction it's already moving, thereby providing, quote, incremental outrageousness, close quote. Ponder how modern historians have used the Gettysburg campaign to create incremental outrages while ignoring pertinent new ideas. This isn't something that Abramson covers in his book, but his thoughts made me think of this example. Consider the conduct of Robert E. Lee's army after it crossed the Potomac River on its second invasion of the North that ended in Gettysburg. Lee specifically ordered that his troops be respectful of private property, notwithstanding that Yankee armies had wantonly destroyed civilian property in Virginia and other southern states. Lee's order cautioned his soldiers, quote, that no greater disgrace could befall the army than the perpetuation of barbarous outrages upon the unarmed and defenseless that have marked the course of the enemy in our country. Such proceedings not only degrade the perpetrators, but are subversive to the discipline and efficiency of the army and destructive of the ends of our present movement. Although his soldiers overwhelmingly complied with his orders, modern historians have looked for ways to discredit Lee and his army's conduct while in Northern Territory. They found it in the form of episodes involving the capture of ex-slaves and free blacks whom they sent south into slavery. In Robert E. Lee and Me, a book written last year by Ty Sedgley, he cited venerable historian Edwin Coddington, who wrote probably one of the best books on Gettysburg about 50 years ago. So Sedgley cited Edwin Coddington to note, quote, under no circumstances could the Confederates justify the hunt for blacks, close quote. That's a quote from Coddington. Now, although Coddington wrote, quote, at least 50 Negroes were sent into slavery in this way, close quote. Ty Sedgley raises the estimate to 1,000. And that shows how the number has become inflated with creeping, quote, incremental outrageousness, close quote, over the last 50 years. As a result, today's students learn nothing of the generosity in Lee's order or in the conduct of his troops, which so much contrasted with the wanton destruction of the Yankee armies in the South. So these students only learn about the distorted portrayal of Confederates capturing blacks, maybe 50, not 1,000, somewhere in between, probably a lot closer to 50. While they increasingly heap contempt, this would be today's academic historians, increasingly heap contempt on the Confederate soldier to gain approval of their peers, consider how today's academic historians ignore a new idea that might cause them to reevaluate some of their one-sided interpretations. They don't want new ideas, but specifically, consider this. Few question whether Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was a deliberate attempt to provoke a slave rebellion in the South so that the Confederate soldier would have to desert the army to return home where he could protect his family. After Lincoln read a first draft of the proclamation to his cabinet in July 1862, Treasury Secretary Salmon Chase advised caution. Even though he was one of the Union's most resolute abolitionists, he felt it would be better to let the generals in the field implement emancipation as they advanced through the South sector by sector, partly to avoid what, quote, depredation and massacre, close quote, of civilians. In other words, in July 1862, Treasury Secretary Chase saw the potential for massacre of Southern civilians through this proclamation. That was 3 months before, or 2 months before Lincoln actually announced the proclamation. After the proclamation was announced on September 22nd, 1862, Union Major General George McClellan complained that the president sought to stir up slave rebellions in order to end the war. McClellan's cannot be dismissed as an isolated opinion because he was Lincoln's opponent in the 1864 wartime presidential election when he received 45% of the total votes. He was also head of the Army of the Potomac, which had just fought at the Battle of Antietam, where Lincoln announced the proclamation. Years later, Colonel Charles Francis Adams Jr., the son of Lincoln's ambassador to Great Britain and the great-grandson and grandson of 2 U.S. presidents, confessed that the prevailing belief in the North at the time of the proclamation was that it would spark an immediate slave rebellion to bring the war to a sudden end. Now, even President Lincoln admitted the possibility of such an insurrection before he issued the proclamation. September 13th, 9 days, September 13th, 1862, 9 days before the proclamation, he replied to a delegation of Chicago abolitionists visiting the White House that he recognized the potential, quote, consequences of insurrection and massacre at the South, close quote, that such a proclamation might provoke. Whatever the moral benefits or immoral consequences of emancipation, he, quote, viewed the matter as a practical war measure to be decided upon according to the advantages and disadvantages it may offer to the suppression of the Confederate rebellion, close quote. While I am not personally convinced that Lincoln intended to ignite a slave rebellion, I do believe the question merits analysis, but it's almost totally ignored. The mere suggestion of it will trigger uncontrollable rage or ridicule or some combination of all of that among the students and professors of today's social justice warriors. The students of most any of today's academic historians will react this way. Okay, so that's my message for today, but I want to share with you this here, which is my book, Causes of the Civil War. It's $22 at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can get it from me for $25 autographed. And if you live here in the United States, I will ship it to you at my cost. Just email me, Phil, PHIL_Lee, LEIGH at me.com. Now, my book on the causes of the Civil War is going to be different than what you've read elsewhere. Things like that I point out here in this talk about the Emancipation Proclamation possibly being a tool for motivating a slave insurrection in the South. I don't know if you've heard that from other books, but I cover it in another one of my books. But my whole point is on the causes of the Civil War. There's a lot in there that you're not going to get from other books. And I particularly focus on why the North refused to let the initial 7 cotton states go in peace and thereby trigger a civil war. That's an important consideration. It's almost totally ignored by those who write other books on the causes of the Civil War because the other books are written by academic historians. You want to combat academic historians, consider buying books from people like me that are not published through those sources. Okay, I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for visiting.